Well, Rebel Moon Part 1 is alright. I'll certainly take this because Snyder is doing his own thing. His own IP, goes as dark as he wants. Nothing is ruined because it's all his thing. It was fun figuring out which of these characters are which equivalent of Star Wars. The droid is 3CPO, but I call him 3CHK because the HK droids are the combat ones. Tarzan over here is just Chewbacca. That's Obi-Wan, and their version of lightsabers they're a little cool. Instead of laser swords, they're just really hot blades. And Korra, Snyder's Star Wars script, that was from years ago, back when Lucas owned Star Wars. But this character is just Finn. She's former Empire. In fact, there's another character that's just Finn, because he was a stormtrooper and just switched sides. Well, after his other stormtroopers were doing some shit, he was not with that. This guy, basically if Han was evil, because he was about to turn all the other characters in to the Empire. And he's Luke, but just a little bit, I'd say. Oh, and this man he seems to be just in everything these days. I can't think of an equivalent for him. But here's what's funny, the planet they found him on was basically Planet 300, and he looked like Kratos in that scene. This man is nearly 60. That God of War show better get Christopher Judge, otherwise they'll probably cast him. And Ray Fisher, just the leader of the Rebel Alliance, but he gets axed. This guy defended Snyder so damn much, kept trashing Justice League 2017, even though that's just the same freaking movie, minus Snyder's darkness. It was just a WB cut. You'd think he would have got a big role. In fact, trailers didn't show him. There were no behind-the-scenes pics with him. I thought he was going to get a huge role. I thought he was going to be Rebel Moon's Darth Vader. No, that goes to this guy. And the guy he works under is Palpatine. So him getting axed is one of the few bad things about this movie. Like, that's it. That's the role he gets. All I'll say is that his sacrifice wasn't stupid. But if he turns out to be alive in part 2, then that sacrifice will be stupid. Anyway, like I thought, Snyder went far with the darkness, went far with his equivalent of the Empire being space World War II Germany. Look at the uniform, like he did not hide it. And I was curious about what was the deal with the club, and that might have been a reference to German raiding clubs that they used in World War I. And back to his equivalent of stormtroopers, yeah, they did some shit that was going insanely dark, unnecessarily I should say, but again, it's his own IP, do whatever. But it's still clear he went way dark for the sake of it, just to show how dark his stormtroopers are. And the other bad thing about this movie, Snyder used too much damn slow-mo from 300. Seriously, just by the halfway point of the movie, there was too much slow-mo. Tone that down for part 2. Other than that, the film's fine. I'm surprised there's no equivalent of Krypton somewhere as an Easter egg or to set up a Snyderverse. Or maybe Snyder's equivalent of the Empire is also Krypton as conquerors. So, what was all that talk on part 2 about? Really got me defending 2 Zack Snyder movies fully. Not a couple of parts here and there, like Batman debating the stupid Cobra once. Or people to this day still blaming Superman for the destruction of Metropolis instead of Zod and the freaking Terraformer. In fact, if Superman took out the one in Metropolis first, the next movie would have been Aquaman v Superman. Arthur would have been pissed. I'm defending 2 entire Zack Snyder movies that I actually like since 300 and Watchmen. And which one was it? Dawn of the Dead? So in part 2, all the badasses are brought together to train these villagers to fight the Empire. And before that, the entire crew has personal reasons for fighting the Empire. I like that actually. That wasn't the case with Luke and the rest, except Obi-Wan, but we didn't know what that personal reason was yet. Speaking of Obi-Wan, Nemesis is my favorite out of the bunch, and I am pissed she didn't make it. In the last video, I call her Obi-Wan, but she's more like Obi-Wan plus Anakin plus Mikasa and Levi's clan. The Empire nearly wiped out her clan. A peaceful one, but they used to be a clan of badasses. And that's where her lightsabers came from. Her clan always had that. And she chops off her own arm because that's the first blood she ever spilled. Her own. And back to these lightsabers, they seem to work like Judge Dredd's gun to recognize certain people. Nemesis blades recognize her clan, and then you got the Empire's blades, which Korra tried to pick up one, but it burned her hand and she had to wrap up the hilt so she could hold the thing. During the Empire's attack, everyone had different jobs. Nemesis was protecting, the children, the women and children that couldn't fight. But what pisses me off is they did not help. They were just cowering in the back. instead of tagging it like those type of scenes usually do. And it's a Zack Snyder movie, so of course they don't help sooner as they normally would. She got stabbed, and RIP. And I also hate the damn robot, Jimmy. Just camping in the back for so long. First camping in the back in the entire first film, part 1. Nearly camping the whole time in part 2. He could have helped sooner, could have saved Nemesis, but nope. Showed up later on. The Darth Vader equivalent was tough to take down. He just had a streak taking down a bunch of people at once. But not all at once, just one at a time. At the end of the battle, the character that I called Luke a little bit, he's RIP too. But things are not over. If Snyder makes part 3 and 4 and such, the new goal is saving the princess. In fact, Korra's personal reason for fighting the Empire, when they took out the royal family, including the princess, all the dirt was put on her. And said princess clearly has their equivalent of the Force. Korra thought she was gone, but really she's still alive. So you know what? Keep this going. The only thing Snyder needs to cut back on is cut back on the damn 300 slow-mo. I hope someone not only did a counter, counting how many slow-mos there were in part 1 and 2, totaled up the entire slow-mo time compared to the length of those two movies. Other than that, Snyder has his own IP. When he does his own thing, that's when his dark and grittiness works. That's when his films don't suck. So people complaining about part 2, I don't know what y'all expected from Zack freaking Snyder. You know things are gonna be dark. You know he recycled his Star Wars script. Which, by the way, this would have sucked as a Star Wars movie. But it's fine as its own thing. So what's the problem? And if this really becomes a franchise, that kid that helped out Nemesis, he better freaking train with those lightsabers. Just gotta wrap up the hills. Because the crew is gonna need all the help they can get when the Emperor shows up. They didn't take him out yet. And lastly, again, Snyder should recycle Nightmare into its own IP. Do the same for that. Hell, get Tom Welling for Snyder's equivalent of a Superman. And, shit, I gotta watch Army of the Dead now, don't I?